Hi there, Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching. And today we're going to cover supporting your sensitive child who is stuck in the meltdown cycle and whether or not you should start intervening in the school setting. So we're going to cover the 3 S's that you need to be paying attention to that will support you in taking action on intervening in the school setting if your child is struggling in school. Here at MTC, we've helped parents of sensitive kids and teens break out of that meltdown shutdown cycle in as little as 8 weeks. That means that you can support your sensitive child sustainably and consistently when you spend some pretty intense time over the course of 2 months in highlighting your child's needs and systematically breaking out of them. And so let's talk about what those needs are. When your child is stuck in the meltdown cycle, that means that your child is likely hitting, kicking, screaming, throwing things, running away, calling names, threatening. Okay, life would be better off without me. You hate me. I hate you. I don't love you. You don't love me anymore. I'm a bad kid. Okay, all of these statements going on for your sensitive child, which can be very scary. Sensitive teens, on the other hand, might be quitting in their emotional state more. So you might see more isolation or refusal for your teen, preteen, etc. If you're not seeing explosive behavior, then the shutdown behavior is what we see for sensitive kids. It's not always the teens though. You can see 8-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds doing this behavior too. So stay tuned, all right? Don't think that this disqualifies you if your 7-year-old is doing more shutdown behavior. Shutdown behavior might be focused on having a screen addiction, difficult to get off the computer or the tablet or the phone, where your sensitive teen might be struggling to follow through on any of their academic goals or their sports or athletic goals. And this can lead to feeling totally disconnected to your child or teen in even being able to relate to them because it's hard for them to get out of bed. It's hard for them to show up to their sports games. It's hard for them to participate in extracurriculars that they've signed up for because they have either lost energy or interest, demonstrated lost energy or interest, said they don't care anymore, or are feeling paralyzed emotionally in the sense that they don't think that they'll do well, which can lead to perfectionistic paralysis, or that they're not sure how to handle solving problems in those settings. And so then there's analysis paralysis in that. I don't know, what if this happens? How will I solve this problem? What if that problem happens? How will I solve that problem? And all of the what ifs end up delaying your kid getting out the door in the first place. And so they just don't even go. So all of these challenges obviously leads to you as a parent being quite exhausted, right? Wondering, especially related to school, and we can cover this in great detail today, whether or not your child is struggling to the point where you need to start intervening. You need to have a conversation with the teacher, set up a meeting, even to discuss a 504 or an IEP option. And so let's break down where you as a parent need to be focused if your child is struggling in the school setting. So in the school setting, you might see your child having meltdowns, or you might see more aggressive behavior that is not to the point where the meltdowns are happening, but they might kick other kids, punch, yell, might have a hard time staying in their seat, have ants in their pants, if you will. This can be important to notice, and it might also be relevant if your child is holding it all in the school setting and exploding right after school. You might be wondering if you should be having conversations with the teacher more so than just, getting an update or wondering if no news is good news from the teacher from a behavior standpoint. and observing how much your child's teacher can really impact your child's behavior, and wondering where your impact needs to be focused, where your focus needs to be for your child's emotional intensity, so that you can make the most impact as well. So two-pronged approach here in observing how your child is educated, obviously, and in addition, how your child is learning emotion regulation skills. So if your child is having meltdowns or shutting down, you might see that for your sensitive kid in disorganization. They might not be able to share with you what they've learned, share with you what their assignments are. They might be telling you they've completed their assignments when they haven't. We might call this work avoidance, where your child is refusing to do homework at home and then panicking that it's not done in the morning, and then you're scrambling to get it done in the morning, and then they're late for school, or they're trying to write it down in the bus or whatever. All of these challenges are related to school stress, maybe even school anxiety, or just a struggle in the school setting to manage their emotions, even if that's more peer related than academic related. And so as a parent, you might be wondering, what do I assess next? What do I assess first? I already am I able to notice my child is struggling. I see these behaviors that I need to curb and have my child demonstrate healthy and more safe behaviors. But where do I start? And so it's important for you to pay attention to the three pieces where if you're going to highlight talking to the school and managing the school's performance in some different way than how they typically support children, then we want to focus on the three things that you should be assessing on whether or not the educational setting is appropriately meeting your kids' needs. And so three of these issues that we want to pay attention to, number one, is whether or not your child's being singled out. So if your child's behavior is disruptive to the classroom, or deemed disruptive to the classroom by a teacher, it might be that they are telling you about it, right? If it's difficult for your kiddo to stay quiet or to leave other children alone, they might be policing other children, telling other kids, hey, these are the rules, that's not fair. And they might try to kind of indicate their own awareness of morality in this dynamic at the school. So not necessarily disruptive to the point where your child would be considered from a traditional standpoint misbehaving, but distracting, right? Could also be that your child has a very busy body and it's difficult for your child to sit still. Or it gets to the point where your child could be disorganized and the teacher is telling you they're not turning in their schoolwork. This could be whether or not they do it with you at home or not, right? So we see parents who have long, drawn-out homework battles and then come to find out the kid's not turning it in at school. And that's obviously super frustrating. Or hearing from your child, they didn't have homework. And since, depending on kiddo's age, if they're at 4th, 5th, 6th grade by that point, it's your child's job to be keeping track of this. You might not get homework reports or supports in place for your child where your child's homework is written down from the teacher. And so when that challenge comes up, it'll be important for your kid to be telling you the truth, right? And working with your child on not only writing down the assignment, but also sharing with you that they wrote it down effectively. And that comes into play, especially as children age. But it's important for you, no matter what your child's age, that you have a collaborative and truthful and trusting relationship, so that they not only are telling you the truth, but also telling you maybe if they're worried about getting the work done and they don't want to do it, or they're worried that they might not do it well, and so it's hard for them to get started, or they're overwhelmed by the assignment, or they don't understand the assignment, right? All kinds of factors that your child could be struggling with if they are not sharing with you whether or not if they're not sharing with you that they have an assignment due. And depending on the teaching style and the age of the child, the grade your child is in, this may or may not be part of the the plan for the teacher to share with you the assignments every day, or even every week. And so that level of independence is expected of your kid. And so being able to support your kid and noticing that they need to meet that expectation, or you might need to talk to the teacher about whether or not they can meet that expectation, is something that you should be focusing on. Now, let's pay attention to, S number 1. We're going to get a little clever here with the 3 S's to focus on whether or not your child needs intervention in the school setting. And 3 of them that you should be focusing on is, number 1 is whether or not your child's being singled out. So if your child's behavior is disruptive, as I mentioned, or is not showing up according to the norm for expectations, then your child's teacher might be paying attention to that differently than they would for the rest of the class. And so it's important for you to pay attention to how frequently this is happening, okay? If your child's teacher is struggling with skills and in managing the classroom, and your child's behavior seems to be the highlight of how they are trying to manage the classroom by supporting your child in an effective way, and you feel like your child's being picked on, then clearly you would need to reach out to the teacher and advocate for your child to be managed differently. Kids can be scolded or criticized for the smallest of things when a teacher is dysregulated or is just simply missing skills. It's important to notice that teachers do not get behavior management education in the majority of master's degree programs, let alone teachers who are working towards their master's and start teaching with a bachelor's degree. So emotional management, behavior management is simply not in the training realm for the teaching profession at a very thorough level. And so when we think about supporting kids in learning and noticing that kids need to be emotionally available in order to learn, it's important for you to observe whether or not your child's teacher is meeting their needs effectively, meeting the needs of the classroom. It's also important to observe that your child's teacher likely has 20, 25, sometimes even 30 kids to be planning a lesson for. And so if your child is struggling in this setting, then that can be quite difficult for not only your child but also the teacher to try to manage everyone at the same time. So observing that is important, because when you think about paying attention to whether or not your child is singled out, obviously we want to pay attention to this in a way that helps your child feel not picked on, right? And it's also true that if your child is being picked on, some of the behavior management strategies that are necessary for your child's teacher to learn and to shift out of would need to be more systematic than just switching teachers or supporting them in speaking differently to your child. And so that requires more than just a conversation, right? Next is obviously number 2 is not just being picked on, right? Highlighting if you're, the second that your child struggles, your child is talked to in the school setting, but more overt shaming. So shaming would be experiences of, do you see other kids doing this? Why are you doing this? It would be better if you would do this behavior. See, why can't, you did just fine for Miss Sally Sue in art. Why aren't you learning, keeping your butt in your seat when when you're learning, when we're reading in English class, right? Things of that nature. So criticizing the child, shaming the child, telling the child they should be doing better than this. All of that behavior is obviously inappropriate. It's also true that some school systems use public shaming to control children's behavior, though it's not effective, right? So what do I mean? Clip systems, red light, green light systems, color-coded behavior charts that are publicly displayed where children move up and down on a scale. All of that is public shaming. And so your school's behavior management system is perpetuating fear. It's also perpetuating a emotional stifling experience for your sensitive kid. And so it's important for you as a parent to observe what is contributing to your child's overwhelm. Now, that's obviously a bigger undertaking if the behavior management system chosen by your school is not only allowing but even championing a system like this, right? So not everybody knows that that shaming doesn't teach, and it's important for you as a parent to notice that if your child's having daily meltdowns, you'll need to know what stops the meltdown behavior, what stops the ineffective behavior, and you'll need to be able to powerfully speak to that in order to advocate in a school setting. Right? So when we help our clients address this in the school setting, we support parents in breaking out of this pattern at home first, because then they have evidence that what they're doing is going to work. And that obviously supports teachers who want to help. I mean, the majority of teachers go into the educational profession to help children learn, right? It's rare these days, especially at how high stress the job is to be a teacher in the first place, that teachers go in willy-nilly because there's nothing else to do, right? They couldn't figure it out or whatever, right? Got a degree in who knows what, and then just decided to be a teacher. Most people don't go into the education profession without intention, because and most people who stay in the education profession in teaching, especially in public school, don't stay for long if they don't feel a passion towards it, right? Because it's very, very hard work to do. And you have to be pretty not only dedicated but also compassionate. Now, teachers can get burnt out, which is where where we're speaking about some of the behaviors that you can see in settings like this, because of that level of overwhelm. And so it's important for you as a parent to notice how you are supporting your child and you're running the odds. You're playing to your child's success in terms of breaking out of the meltdown cycle. The meltdown cycle is perpetuated more regularly by a lack of skills and an ineffective relationship, an invalidating relationship, actually in the parent-child relationship, not in the school setting. So we see kids change their behavior at school, and we see kids more effectively handle ineffective support settings in school when they change their relationship with their parents. So you actually build more resilience in your child, even if you don't or can't, even if you tried, right? Even if you're not able to affect lasting community change in your kid's school. So that's important to observe when we think about S number 2. S number 3 is stigmatizing. So, your child is highly sensitive, and while we don't want that stigma to perpetuate here at MTC, it's our mission to eliminate suicidal thoughts and actions for highly sensitive kids and highly sensitive people around the world. That means that we have to help highly sensitive kids early feel better about themselves, and help parents of sensitive kids build and foster not only resilience but self-acceptance in their children. And that in and of itself creates a ripple effect in communities, which breaks down the stigma. And our mission has not been completed yet. We've only had a few years under our belt in even starting it. And so knowing that not everybody has broken out of the stigma of thinking that sensitivity is a weakness. Now, sensitivity is an evolutionarily important trait. We need people, animals, and insects to be sensitive, to notice small details, to think about things differently, to observe the world in a more globally oriented way. And that's why the highly sensitive trait has been found in over 100 different species. We would have, quote unquote, trained it out of ourselves if it wasn't necessary, especially when parenting included much more corporal punishment, decades ago than it does even now. Because if corporal punishment worked, right, we quote unquote train it out through aggression, then we wouldn't have sensitive kids anymore, right? those sensitive kids would have become significantly decrepit and wouldn't procreate. So we know that's not true, right? We know that's not true. And we know that highly sensitive kids have been able to survive in the human society for centuries. And as a result, it's important for us to observe what helps them thrive. Okay, and this is the important piece. Okay, because stigma for your child, your child might be labeled disruptive. There might even be a mental health label that labels them disruptive. Or an IEP label that labels them disturbed. And so that's important, okay, to notice how you're advocating for your child in these emotional needs, so that your child isn't labeled with an ineffective category. And so explaining to parents and teachers and other community members alike about the personality trait is a lot easier to do when you've already broken down the meltdown cycle. When your child is no longer experiencing the intense emotional distress that they're experiencing, because just explaining why your kid is experiencing intense emotional distress by saying they're highly sensitive, that leads other people to assess, well, what are you doing about it, right? Because that if your child is suffering, then me just knowing why they're suffering, that they're highly sensitive without skills, doesn't help me help you, right? So there's still that piece that's very challenging if you're trying to advocate, my kid's highly sensitive, this is why they're having meltdowns. It puts people whom you're asking for help in a yeah but position, because if there's no solution that you're adding to that advocacy, to that education component, when you're asking for support, then you're both spinning your wheels. Sure, you understand your child's personality maybe, but if you don't know what helps break the cycle, then your child will stay with the stigma, and it'll be more of a lost cause assessment or a label that people might even discount. That's not relevant. There's something else going on because there's no awareness from you being shared to them about what will solve the problem. So this is another reason why when we coach parents who come to us whose kids are significantly struggling at school, we take a two-pronged approach. You have to advocate in the school setting, but you also have to take immediate action at home in order to solve this problem. We've helped parents whose kids, even kindergartners, are kicked out of kindergarten, kicked out of preschool, daycare setting, etc., stay in the one that they're about to get kicked out of when they reach out to us. And it's also true that not all the parents who contact us, who work with us, whose kids are struggling to the point where expulsion is around the corner. It might be just that your child is, and I say just not to minimize it, obviously, but to understand that there's a scale here, that your child is struggling to the point where your child is just refusing to go to school, doesn't want to attend, but ends up going every day for however method you're helping that happen, or they are miserable on a daily basis, or as we mentioned earlier here, they're disruptive, and so they might be you might be getting hints that you should start considering whether or not your kid fits the criteria for ADHD. You might be asked to have your child go get evaluated. Reading between the lines of what people are implying when they ask for you to go do that. So this is important for you to observe, okay? Just like name calling doesn't help anybody, labels without solutions doesn't help your child in breaking out of the pattern. So let's talk about it, okay? In terms of breaking out of the pattern, your child needs to be able to feel supported at home. When we observe that the transformation agent, the change agent for sensitive kids and sensitive teens alike, is the parent-child relationship, then you get to decide how much or how little intervention that you start taking on in the school setting at all. Because when your child knows how to regulate themselves, they stop being disruptive. So you might not need to worry about changing your child's school setting. You might just decide to to support your child in managing how they are being taught for the next couple of months till school's over, right? You might decide to switch teachers, but not decide to, and advocate for a switching of teachers, but not decide to go to the point where you advocate for the school to change their whole behavior management system. Because perhaps one teacher's personality displays the behavior management system in a different way, so much so that while your child's simultaneously learning emotional management skills, they can tolerate the use of an ineffective behavior management system in a more effective way. It doesn't bother them as much, right? That's resilience. So there are lots of different ways to support your child in a school setting that may or may not require you to seek professional support in the school setting by intervening and asking or advocating for professional change. And the first thing that you need to be doing is changing the relationship you have with your child so that they know how to change their behavior with you. Once they know how to do that, they feel much more powerful changing it with other adults. So that's important. So if you're seeing consistent meltdowns, you're seeing consistent shutdowns, then you are the one who needs to be focusing on this with your child first. And then it's important to highlight any other professionals involved, any other adults involved in these relationships. Now, you heard me speak specifically about children who are being singled out, children who are being picked on, both intentionally or automatically, unintentionally, etc. Because that's the majority of the history that we hear from our clients. It's just a generally unpleasant relationship in the school setting, and some of that is due to lack of education of the school provider, the teacher, or the principal, or the school system in general, rather than malicious intent. So obviously, if your child's being maliciously mistreated, that would require a meeting directly with the teacher's supervisor, principal, etc., contact with the school board. And it's also true that most kids who are struggling in school aren't being directly targeted by their teachers. I'm not here, this message here is not to vilify teachers. You might have heard me say this before. 70% of the families that we work with, at least one parent works in the helping profession. We work with a ton of teachers who just never learned any of this. They end up taking some of these skills into their own classrooms because it's something that you can't unlearn, and you realize it's helpful for all children. And so teachers aren't to blame here in this dynamic, right? And so what's great about that is that you as a parent have much more power in this experience than you might think you do. If your child's struggling in school, you might feel like you have to defer to the school, or you might feel like this is out of your kid's hands or out of your hands, right? Out of your hands more often than out of your kid's hands because your child is a child. But that's not true. Highly sensitive kids change their behavior through their relationship with their parents. Highly sensitive kids who don't have skills to manage their emotions. If your kid's having meltdowns, they don't have skills to manage their emotions. Once children build those skills, they then learn to generalize those skills. The concept of generalization means that you can take the skill and put it into place in any situation. Okay? So a skill set like being able to hit a ball with the tennis racket in the center of the tennis racket. I don't know why I picked tennis. I haven't played tennis since 5th grade. Probably should have picked soccer. Whatever. So, that's a skill, right? Be able to consistently nail the tennis ball in the middle of the tennis racket. So then you have more control, right, over where you're hitting it, because if you can hit the tennis racket at an angle and you get the ball in the center of your racket, then you can control that it's going to go down faster over the net than if it's going to go wide out. If you're just whacking it far, you're likely going to be getting it out of bounds quickly. So that skill, right, being able to hit the ball with the racket in the right spot, is something that you can generalize no matter where you are on the court. Okay, so you might be up on the court or closer to the net. You might be further back. You might need to stretch. You might need to get down low and bend down. Those are generalizations of the actual skill, which is hitting, getting the ball to hit the middle of your racket, aiming. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about when your kid has a skill to manage their emotions, like noticing where their feelings feel, what feelings they feel on a regular basis, how big they are, where they emotionally experience this in their body, etc. All of those skills, right, can be used in any setting, whether they're in the playground at recess, whether they are in the classroom, whether they're in art class versus English class, whether they are at home, right? Children feel capable of generalizing their skills and demonstrating that generalization when they learn the skills at home. So this is really important because the availability for you to teach those skills requires a foundation. You need to be able to teach them playfully. You need to be able to teach them from a place of noticing what your kid's capable of, which means if you've tried teaching these skills before and hasn't been successful, that means that you need to change the way that you think about your child, because it will be successful with the right strategy rather than just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. And of course, that's not going to work, right? Like I tell my clients all the time, you follow a recipe and you put things in the wrong order, you put the eggs on last, in the brownie recipe, you're going to end up with salmonella every time. Does it mean that your brownie shouldn't include eggs? No. Now, if you have an allergy to eggs and you're substituting them with applesauce, you'll have the same problem if you put the applesauce on last, right? So you're not going to get salmonella, but you're not going to get good brownies either, right? So the eggs need to be in a certain order. And that's what we talk about in terms of the difference between a strategy and a tactic. A tactic is teaching your kid to take deep breaths. That doesn't work. That is not working in your household likely because the strategy is ineffective. Human beings need to be able to take deep breaths. That is an exceptionally calming experience when we take deep breaths. But highly sensitive kids aren't taking deep breaths regularly when they need to in any setting in their life, because the foundational skills are not being taught, and because the experience of their relationship with you is struggling right now. And again, that's only because there's a mismatch in parenting. It's not because you're broken. It's not because your kid is broken. It's not because that you're a bad parent or that they're a bad kid, right? It's that the skills aren't being taught in the most appropriate strategy. Here at MTC, we've nailed down that strategy. We know how to do it. It works every single time. When families do the work, they eliminate daily meltdowns. That's why we have a 98.9% success rate, because everybody does the work except for that 1%. And I'm happy with those results. And I hope, in terms of your success when you commit to solving this problem, those are pretty high odds, right? Because if you want to break out of the pattern, you got to do the work to break out of the pattern. That's a no-brainer. So when we think about being able to do that consistently, what do you need to do? When you eliminate those daily meltdowns, breaking out of that pattern, having meltdown-free days, meltdown-free weeks. That's what the pattern breaking out, what I mean by that. So that's how you can measure your success. You need to be able to feel like you can do that repeatedly. That means that you need to be able to have a system to assess ineffective behavior. So if your kid stops hitting and then they start yelling, you need to know what to do in both scenarios. Because if you're trying to solve a problem with a different strategy, regardless of the behavior, it's not going to work. So you'll feel defeated and frustrated, and like the problem is just, the target's always moving, and that's not effective in breaking out of the meltdown cycle consistently. Because if you're frustrated and you're trying to teach your kid, they're not going to learn from you. So how do we break out of this pattern consistently? You need to be able to do this playfully, without shame, right? And that requires you to have support as a parent. You need somebody in your corner who can show you how to do it well and consistently and effectively. And in order to do that consistently and effectively, you need to troubleshoot. You need to say, hey, did I do it right? This is how this went, or this is how I'm going to do it. Does that make sense, right? You need a sounding board. That requires professional support. We're happy to be that professional support if we are a fit. I don't know if we're a fit. We have to have a conversation about it. That conversation could be free. It is free, but it can be available to you. And whether or not we're gonna work together is the can be part, is the could be part, possible part. We have to have a conversation about where your family is struggling, what your family's goals are, what your goals are for your particular child, and how that impacts the entire family dynamic. And if what we do would help you get there, then we tell you exactly how that works on that same phone call. If I feel like something that would be more appropriate is where your family needs to go, then you would need to have a conversation with my team, and we'd talk about that instead. So we wouldn't even talk about what we do here at MTC and how it would fit your family if your family doesn't need that particular service. Because why waste anybody's time doing that, right? Let's point you in the right direction if it's not with us. I'm happy to do that. My team is happy to do that. And we're available to have that conversation with you now. Go ahead over to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk or meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk, and we'll have a conversation with you and your teen if your teen is in high school age or over. Again, conversation's free and has the power to change your whole life, because you have the ability to make changes right away on that same day. And being able to do that consistently is something that obviously will help you change the whole family dynamic. That's what we're here for. So we're happy to have that conversation with you. Looking forward to it, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.